I died on the snowy night of Chinese New Year's Eve. This was the second time I experienced this moment. The cold wind scraped my cheeks like knives as I knelt before the door of room 1602, my fingers already purple from frostbite, yet still mechanically knocking. Leona, please, fever medicine, my mother my voice was so hoarse it no longer sounded human. From behind the door came the sound of the Spring Festival Gala playing on TV, the audience's laughter so piercing it made me want to cry. Thud. An empty medicine box was thrown out, hitting me in the face. The edge of the plastic packaging left a bloody scratch on my frozen cheek. I told you there's none left. What awful luck during the new year. Leona's voice came through the door. Knock again and I'll call the police. Trembling, I picked up the empty medicine box. It was a box of ibuprofen sustained-release capsules. Manufactured just 3 days prior, right when medicines were scarcest after the pandemic lockdown was lifted. The box still carried the warmth from her home's heating. I clutched the empty medicine box desperately, stumbling my way home. The thermometer in the hallway showed -52 degrees Celsius, my exhaled breath frosting into ice crystals on my eyelashes. A faint candlelight seeped through the door crack of room 1601. Pushing the door open, I saw Mom curled up on the sofa, covered with every piece of clothing we could find. Her face was unnaturally red, her breathing as labored as a broken bellows. Mom, I'm sorry. I placed the empty medicine box in her burning palm. I'm useless. Mother's fingers twitched, but she didn't even have the strength to hold the medicine box. Her lips moved, and I leaned down to listen. Amara, are you cold? Come, let Mom hold you. These were her last words. I held her gradually cooling body tightly, feeling my own body temperature slowly fading away. The snow outside the window grew heavier, with sporadic firecracker sounds echoing in the distance. How strange. People actually feel warm right before freezing to death. In my dazed state, I began removing my coat. At that moment, I heard Leona's laughter from next door, along with the clinking of glasses. Happy New Year. I stared fixedly at the empty pill box, using every last ounce of strength to crush it out of shape before losing consciousness. If there could be a next life. Ding-ling-ling. The piercing alarm clock jolted me awake. I sat up abruptly, covered in cold sweat. The familiar bedroom. The warm quilt, the phone on the nightstand displayed, January 15th, 7:30 a.m. With trembling hands, I opened my phone. The calendar showed today was the 24th day of the 12th lunar month, 6 days left until New Year's Eve. Amara, are you awake? I made congee. Mom's voice came from outside the door. Tears welled up in my eyes instantly. Barefoot, I rushed out and saw Mom standing in the kitchen wearing an apron, ladling pork and preserved egg congee into bowls. Her cheeks were rosy. Her fingers nimble, nothing like, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Mom looked at me in astonishment. Seeing the tears streaming down my face, I clung to her desperately, inhaling the faint scent of cooking oil and the fresh fragrance of laundry detergent, crying like a child. This child, go wash up quickly, the porridge is getting cold. I sat at the dining table, mechanically spooning porridge into my mouth. The steaming porridge slid down my throat, feeling terrifyingly real, not a dream. I pinched my thigh 3 times, wincing in pain each time. I've truly been reborn. 1 week before the calamity strikes, suddenly, a commotion came from outside the window. I walked to the balcony and saw a van parked downstairs, with workers unloading boxes. 16th floor, be careful, these are all valuable medicines, a familiar voice commanded. My blood ran cold instantly. It was Leona. I hid behind the curtains, watching her direct workers to carry over a dozen cardboard boxes labeled XX Pharmaceuticals into the elevator. Around her neck hung a jade pendant I'd never seen before, shimmering with an eerie glow in the sunlight. In my past life at this time, I'd never paid her any attention, though we were neighbors. Ours was merely a nodding acquaintance, until the 3rd day of the extreme cold, when the entire city lost power and heating. My mother caught the fever while caring for an infected colleague. I clutched the curtains with a death grip. Those cardboard boxes absolutely contained medicine. I remember the logo on that empty medicine box. It was from XX Pharmaceuticals. A terrifying thought crossed my mind. She knew the disaster was coming. For the next few hours, I stood guard at the peephole like a creep, checking every 10 minutes. At 3 p.m., the property management came to collect trash, and I seized the chance to pretend taking out garbage. Passing by her doorstep, the door of Unit 1602 was tightly shut, but 2 boxes of empty mineral water bottles were placed outside. I crouched to tie my shoelaces and casually touched one of the bottles, ice cold. Inside were partially melted ice cubes. It's January 15th. The outdoor temperature is 8 degrees Celsius. Where did she get so much ice from? When I got home, I turned on my computer and frantically searched for recent weather warnings. All official forecasts showed just a regular cold wave for the coming week, with temperatures no lower than -5 degrees Celsius, but I knew better. I remember that -52 degrees Celsius thermometer. After nightfall, I peered through the peephole again. At 1 a.m., there was finally movement in the hallway. Leona emerged from the elevator wearing a thick down jacket, followed by two men in black pushing a flatbed cart piled high with bulging woven bags. Gently, "Don't wake the neighbors," she whispered in a low voice. I held my breath. They carried things back and forth 3 times, and on the last trip, a bag tore open, spilling several vacuum-sealed packages of rice. Strangely enough, after these things were moved in, the area in front of room 1602 returned to its empty state. There were no traces of anything being piled up, as if nothing had ever happened. Early the next morning, I deliberately got up early and kept watch on the balcony. At exactly 7 o'clock, Leona appeared downstairs, carrying an empty shopping bag as she walked toward the neighborhood entrance. I immediately put on my coat and followed. She went to the pharmacy first. "I need 10 boxes of ibuprofen, 10 boxes of Lianhua Qingwen, 5 boxes of amoxicillin." She listed a long string of medication names. The clerk looked at her in surprise. "There's a purchase limit now, only 1 box per person per type." Leona smiled and pulled out a stack of cash from her wallet. "I have many elderly at home. Please help me out." I hid behind the shelves, watching her use the same method to raid 3 pharmacies, then went to the supermarket and bought 20 cases of mineral water, 10 cases of compressed biscuits, and a large quantity of canned food. The strangest part was that all these items were requested to be delivered directly to room 1602, XX residential complex. Yet she continued shopping empty-handed. At noon, she entered a jewelry store and came out with her jade pendant missing from her neck, replaced by a jade bracelet. At 3 p.m., I returned to the residential complex early and happened to see the delivery truck parked downstairs. Workers were unloading all the items she had purchased from various stores, / the goods ordered by MS, Leona from room 1602. "Just leave them at the door, / the deliveryman said. I hid in the stairwell, watching as the supplies piled up in the hallway outside her door, but when I passed by again at 8 p.m., the hallway was completely empty. Room 1602 was quiet, with no lights on, but from beneath the door crack, I saw a flickering blue light, like that from a computer screen. I returned home, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. There's definitely something wrong with her, those vanished supplies, the unusual hoarding behavior, and that jade pendant that could absorb things. I opened my phone and searched for suddenly hoarding large quantities, and all that popped up were entries related to mental disorders, until I clicked into a post-apocalyptic survival forum and saw a thread titled 10 Signs Before a Catastrophe Strikes. If you notice someone suddenly stockpiling large amounts of supplies, especially medicine and food, if these supplies mysteriously disappear, if this person suddenly sells valuables for cash, my blood gradually ran cold. The post concluded with, "Then this person likely knows something, either a reincarnator, or..." I looked up toward room 1602, and a terrifying thought surfaced in my mind. She came through from the book. "Please let me know if any adjustments or additions are needed." I stared at the Doomsday Forum post on my phone screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard, frozen in hesitation. If she truly is a transmigrator, if she knows the apocalypse is coming, then in my past life, she clearly had medicine yet watched my mother die. I took a deep breath and closed the webpage. Now wasn't the time for anger. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that could convince the government. Call the police directly. No way. The police would just treat it as a common dispute, at most giving a reprimand or lecture, and definitely wouldn't search her house. I need to find a way to get inside. Early the next morning, I put on a face mask, dug out an old work ID from my previous company, and used Photoshop to alter it to read XX Community Epidemic Prevention Inspection Team. After printing it out, I found an old folder and stuffed in some blank forms, a perfect fake identity. I stood in front of door 1602, took a deep breath, then raised my hand to knock. "Who is it?" Leona's voice came from inside. "Highly alert, Community Epidemic Prevention Inspection, with the recent flu outbreak. We need to register residents' health status." I deliberately raised my voice to sound like an impatient staff member. The door opened a crack, revealing Leona's face as she eyed me suspiciously. That jade pendant still hung around her neck, emitting a faint green glow in the dim hallway. "I didn't receive any notice," she frowned. "Random inspection. With the recent COVID resurgence, authorities are requiring strict checks." I waved my fake work badge and said firmly, "Cooperate please. It'll just take 5 minutes." She hesitated for a moment before finally opening the door slightly, but still blocked the entrance with her body. "Just register here. She's on guard against me." I pretended to lower my head and flip through the forms, while stealing a glance through the door crack. The entrance was piled with several cardboard boxes bearing the XX Pharmaceuticals logo, identical to that empty medicine box from my past life. Further inside, the living room floor was scattered with vacuum-sealed bags of rice and crates of mineral water. Sure enough, she was hoarding supplies. "Have you had any fever or cough symptoms recently?" While mechanically asking the questions, I quietly pointed my phone camera inside the door and pressed the record button with my thumb. "No," she replied impatiently. "Is this enough?" At that moment, a dull thud came from the room behind her, like something heavy hitting the ground. Leona's expression changed abruptly as she turned her head sharply, seizing the opportunity. I extended my phone forward, aiming the camera lens into the room. At least 20 boxes of fever-reducing medicine were piled beside the refrigerator. What's that sound? I pretended to be puzzled. The cat knocked something over. She quickly closed the door. Have you finished registering? I pretended to check boxes on the form. But my heart was pounding wildly. She lied. She never had a cat. All right. Thank you for your cooperation. I closed the folder and turned to leave. After taking just 2 steps, her voice suddenly called out from behind. Wait. A chill ran down my spine as I slowly turned back. Leona stared at me with cold eyes. Are you really from the community? She became suspicious. I forced myself to stay calm. Of course, you can verify any issues with the neighborhood committee. She didn't speak. Her gaze falling on my hands. My nails were digging into the folder from tension. The edges already turning white. The air froze for a second. Bang. She suddenly slammed the door shut. I stood in the hallway, cold sweat soaking through my back. She found out. Upon returning home, I immediately locked the door and replayed the secretly recorded video. Though the footage was shaky, it clearly showed: 1. The entrance is piled with medicines and food. 2. There are several military-grade thermal boxes in the corner of the living room, typically used for polar expeditions. 3. Most crucially, her jade pendant faintly emits an unnatural blue glow from certain angles. That's no ordinary piece of jewelry. I took out my phone, backed up the video, then opened my computer and started organizing the materials. 1. Leona's recent shopping records, obtained through connections at the neighborhood delivery station. 2. Receipts from her jewelry sales, secretly photographed while tailing her. 3. The recently secretly filmed stockpiling video. Finally, I wrote an anonymous tip letter, attached all the evidence, and sent it to the public email address of the Municipal Emergency Management Bureau. Subject: suspicious individuals found stockpiling strategic supplies in large quantities, suspected of foreknowing disaster. After sending it successfully, I slumped in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Now, all that's left is to wait for the government's response. 3 days later, the community suddenly announced fire inspection, checking every household for potential safety hazards. When the uniformed staff knocked on the door of 1602, Leona's face instantly turned pale. The game has begun. On the day of the fire inspection, I stayed by the peephole the entire time, not even daring to blink. 3 men in firefighter uniforms stood at the door of Unit 1602, one holding a registration form while the other 2 carried detection devices. Leona blocked the doorway, her tone stiff. There's no problem in my apartment. The circuits have already been checked. Standard procedure. Please cooperate. The team leader spoke with steady authority, leaving no room for refusal. Leona's fingers unconsciously reached for the jade pendant around her neck, her knuckles turning white. She was nervous. After a few seconds of standoff, she finally stepped aside. As the firefighters entered, I clearly saw one of them, the tallest, quickly scanned the living room with a sharp gaze that didn't seem like an ordinary firefighter's. They're from the Ministry of State Security. I held my breath as I watched them enter. The door wasn't fully closed, and I could faintly hear their conversation. What's in these cardboard boxes? Just some daily necessities. Take a look. After a rustling sound, there was sudden silence for 2 seconds. Is this medical protective clothing and antibiotics? The man's voice suddenly turned serious. Ms. Leona, care to explain? My heart is pounding so hard it hurts. My palms are drenched in sweat. They found out. Half an hour later, Leona was taken away, not a police car, but an unmarked black van. Before getting in the car, she suddenly turned back to glance at our building, her eyes filled with venomous hatred as if frosted with ice. I hid behind the curtains until the taillights disappeared around the corner before collapsing onto the floor. Did it work? Early the next morning, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw the tall firefighter from yesterday standing outside the door, accompanied by a woman in casual clothes. Ms. Lynn, we're from the City Emergency Management Bureau. The woman showed her ID. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding your neighbor. How did they know it was me who reported it? I forced myself to stay calm as I opened the door. After entering, the taller man went straight to the balcony and drew the curtains. 2. Don't be nervous. The woman smiled. We received your email. It's very valuable. She handed me a tablet displaying Leona's online shopping records. 3 full pages of nothing but freeze-dried food, water purification tablets, cold weather gear. The earliest entry was from 6 months ago. None of these supplies are currently in her home. The man suddenly spoke up. During our search, we found her storage room was practically empty. I suddenly looked up. Impossible. I saw it with my own eyes, saw her move the stuff in, but it vanished the next day. Right. The woman interjected, her gaze sharp. A chill ran down my spine as I nodded. The woman and man exchanged a glance before she pulled out a clear evidence bag from her purse. Inside was Leona's jade pendant. Do you recognize this? My throat tightened. She kept wearing it during last night's interrogation. It suddenly became scalding hot. The man's voice lowered. Our body cameras captured some anomalous footage. He pulled up a video clip. In the interrogation room, a crack suddenly appeared on Leona's jade bracelet, and a box of amoxicillin materialized out of thin air. Plop. As the medicine box landed on the table, all the surveillance equipment in the room simultaneously flickered with static. Miss Lin, the woman stared directly into my eyes. You know something, don't you? My nails dig deep into my palms. Should I tell the truth? Should I tell them? I died once. The woman's gaze pinned me like a knife. I clenched my fists, nails nearly piercing my palms. Should I tell the truth? If I tell them I'm reborn, will they think I'm crazy? Or worse, get locked up in a lab with Leona? But that footage from the body cam, the government has clearly noticed something abnormal. I had just started speaking when the man suddenly pulled out a phone from his pocket, opened a photo, and pushed it in front of me. It was a surveillance screenshot of me at the post office entrance 3 days ago when I mailed the whistleblowing letter. We know it's you, the woman said calmly, but what's even stranger is, she swiped the screen, and the next photo froze the blood in my veins. Leona's computer desktop, an open document titled Doomsday Survival Diary 2030, while the system time in the lower right corner clearly displayed, January 18th, 2023, this can't be, I heard my own hoarse voice. The document was created last June, the man said, but it mentioned the South to North Water Diversion Anti-Freezing Project that was only approved this December. This code name is known to fewer than 10 people internally. The woman suddenly leaned forward. Miss Lin, do you know what the most bizarre part is? She pulled up another video, showing Leona's hysterical scene in the interrogation room. You don't understand it all. After the extreme cold comes acid rain, then insect plagues. It's clearly written in the original work. She struggled frantically against the handcuffs. Why arrest me? I'm just trying to save myself. Original work. This word struck my mind like lightning. Did she just mention the original work? My voice trembled. Both instantly straightened their backs. The woman's gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. How did you notice this word? It's over. I bit my tongue hard, but it was already too late. The man suddenly pulled out a file from his briefcase. The first page showed my photo with my job title from the company ID circled in red, Pharmaceutical Company Logistics Dispatcher. Last month, a batch of vaccines went missing from the National Pharmaceutical Reserve. The man spoke word by word. Only the dispatch system can access the transportation routes and handover times. I stood up abruptly. You suspect me? No. The woman pressed down the man's hand. We've checked on you. You were on a business trip in another city that day. She took a deep breath and suddenly changed the subject. Do you know why we called you in? I shook my head. Because in Leona's diary, she clicked to the last page of the document, mentioned a neighbor girl who froze to death on New Year's Eve. My breath stopped. She already knew I would die. And today, the woman glanced at her watch. It's January 19th. There are 5 days left until New Year's Eve, so now. The man placed the jade pendant on the coffee table, and it was emitting an eerie glow. Please tell us honestly, how exactly did you discover Leona's abnormality? The pendant's glow reflected on my deathly pale face. Tick, a drop of sweat trickled down my forehead. Because, I closed my eyes. I've been through this once before. The moment I uttered those words, the room fell terrifyingly silent. The glow of the jade pendant danced on the coffee table, like some eerie heartbeat. The woman, she asked me to call her director Jasper, slowly straightened up, looking at me with complex emotions in her eyes. You mean, you were reborn? I clenched the hem of my clothes and nodded. Unexpectedly, she exchanged a glance with that national security man and surprisingly didn't show an absurd expression. The National Standard Code for 2030, Dax suddenly spoke up. Can you recite it? I was stunned. What? /GB/T21073-2030. He stared into my eyes. This is the standard mentioned in Leona's documentation, but it doesn't actually exist. Can you confirm? He was testing me. I shook my head. I don't know any codes. I only remember the calamity. Be more specific. Section Chief Jasper turned on the voice recorder, so I spoke. A New Year's Eve at -52 degrees, the despair of power and internet outage. Mom's fever spiking to 41 degrees, and that empty medicine box thrown aside. By the end, the voice was trembling uncontrollably. Dax suddenly stood up and walked toward the balcony, his back rigid. Section Chief Jasper's fountain pen nib pierced a black hole into the paper. What role does Leona play in the original work? She suddenly asked. I froze. I'm not sure if she's transmigrated into the book or she calls herself the female protagonist of an apocalyptic novel, Section Chief Jasper sneered, but according to the diary's contents, she was actually just a supporting character who knew the plot. She pulled up the interrogation records on her tablet. Question, why hoard supplies instead of saving people? Answer, in the original story, 90% of people in this apartment block would die during this segment. The survivors were all my allies. That pharmaceutical company girl, pauses. Anyway, she was destined to freeze to death. My nails dug sharply into my palms, doomed to freeze to death. 2 hours later, I was taken into a heavily guarded building on the outskirts of the city. The Candle Dragon project, initiated 3 days ago, Section Chief Jasper swiped open a heavy blast door, originally designed to counter potential biochemical attacks. Seems we'll have to repurpose it now. Behind the door lay an underground space vast enough to accommodate 10,000 people, where workers were installing massive radiators beneath a ceiling crisscrossed with pipes like spider webs. Corners were piled with the same thermal containers I'd seen at Leona's home, now emblazoned with the national emblem. According to Leona's diary, the extreme cold period will last 79 days. Dax pointed eastward. They're retrofitting geothermal wells there. The western zone is a medical shelter. Your mother will be prioritized for placement. I whipped my head around. You found her. We received her yesterday, Section Chief Jasper said softly, at the Kunming summer retreat base, where it's a constant 25 degrees Celsius. My eyes suddenly grew hot. In my past life, my mother walked 3 kilometers in minus 50 degrees Celsius weather to find medicine for me. Where's Leona? I asked hoarsely. Dax's expression suddenly turned strange. Her jade pendant cracked this morning, and then, his walkie-talkie suddenly crackled to life. Dax, suspect unconscious. We've got a situation at the warehouse. When we rushed into the temporary warehouse, the sight before us sent chills down my spine. Leona was slumped unconscious in a chair, while on the floor before her, a small mountain of supplies had materialized out of nowhere. Crates of medicine, canned food, even 2 diesel generators. What's even more terrifying is that these things are becoming transparent at a visible rate. Space collapse. Section Chief Jasper lunged toward the nearest box of medicine. Quick, save the supplies. I stood frozen in place, suddenly noticing a corner of blue peeking out from the pile of supplies. It was a crumpled book. 3. The moment I picked it up in the chaos, I felt as if struck by lightning. Polar apocalypse. Becoming queen at -50 degrees Celsius. Leona's face was prominently displayed on the cover. The temperature is plummeting. Someone suddenly shouted. The thermometer in the warehouse corner was dropping frantically. -10 degrees Celsius. -15 degrees Celsius. -20 degrees Celsius. Outside the window, this year's first snowflake landed on the blast-proof glass, 3 days earlier than predicted, on the 7th day of the extreme cold's arrival. I stood before the glass curtain wall of the National Emergency Command Center, watching the heavy snowfall outside. The numbers on the display screen were clear and calm, -5 degrees Celsius asterisk, compared to the -52 degrees Celsius from my previous life. This was almost considered warm. In the hall behind me, staff were busily answering reports from various regions. Changchun Shelter has received 120,000 people, with geothermal heating operating stably. Zhengzhou material distribution completed. Second batch of cold-resistant clothing airdropped. Kunming Base reports first group of elderly adapting well. I instinctively touched the pass on my chest. Special Consultant Amara from the Disaster Warning Center. 3 months ago, I was just an ordinary employee worrying about rent. Now, my memory data has become a key parameter for the National Disaster Relief Plan. Consultant Amara. Section Chief Jasper approached and handed me a hot coffee. Leona is awake, in the special ward. Leona's limbs were secured with soft restraint straps. The once lustrous jade pendant now lay shattered into several pieces, quietly resting in the evidence bag. Her pupils contracted violently when she saw me. How are you still alive? Deviations from the original work. I deliberately echoed the terminology from her diary, her expression instantly contorted. Impossible. The 90% mortality rate in the apartment building is a crucial plot point, so you knew the disaster was coming, but chose not to save anyone. I approached the sickbed. Just to be your apocalypse queen. What do you know? She suddenly struggled frantically. In the original story, I used these supplies to build a survivor base. Everyone would beg me on their knees. Looking at the bulging veins on her neck, I suddenly felt both ridiculous and pitiful. Did you know? I whispered softly. The supplies you hoarded are now feeding disaster victims across half the province. She froze. As for you, I pointed out the window. There are currently 836 dungeons nationwide, each 100 times larger than your base. Impossible, she screamed hysterically. Apocalyptic novels aren't written this way. I took one last look at this madwoman and turned to leave. Outside the door, Dax was discussing with the engineers. The jade fragments indeed exhibit quantum entanglement. Yes, just like that jade bracelet we confiscated last time, on New Year's Eve. I video-called my mom at the Kunming base. Behind her was the climate-controlled garden, where elderly residents were making dumplings. A little girl runs across the frame, holding a pink hand warmer in her hand. It was modified from the heating pads Leona had stockpiled. Amara, look, Mom holds up a box of ibuprofen. The base medical station gave it out, said it was for preventive distribution. The national emblem is printed on the medicine box. Outside the window, the snow gradually stopped. The main screen in the command center switched to the national weather map. Extreme cold wave warning lifted. Temperatures expected to rise above 0 degrees Celsius tomorrow. I fished out the crumpled novel from my pocket, the annotations on the last page still faintly visible. Finale. The female lead establishes a dictatorial empire. Snap. I threw the book into the shredder. Story 2. A torrential rain struck, and my best friend believed that the end of the world had arrived and decided to go on a 0 yuan purchase spree at the mall. I tried to persuade her to wait a bit longer and not to believe those novels. The social order was still in place, and doing this now was tantamount to burglary. My best friend heeded my words and indeed didn't go. However, our neighbor went on a 0 yuan purchase and came back with a lot of supplies. Enjoying a good life with delicious food and drinks, my best friend hated me for blocking her path to becoming the protagonist and pushed me off the building, causing me to drown. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the first day of the torrential rain. 1. Freya. Later Jacob and brother Scar will take us to for a 0 yuan purchase. Get yourself ready. I was jolted awake by the voice of my best friend, Ember. I rushed to the window and saw that it was pouring heavily outside, and the water level had just reached the thighs of an adult man. Only then did I confirm that I had been reborn to the first day of the torrential rain. In my previous life, it was also at this time, our city encountered such a heavy rain for the first time, and the drainage system couldn't keep up. The municipal authorities were stepping up repairs. Everyone was trapped in their houses and could only communicate online. As a result, a lot of alarmist remarks emerged. This heavy rain started last night, right? There's no sign of it weakening. Do you think it could be the end of the world? I just went out for a while. Beyond 1 meter, you can't tell humans from animals. There seem to be some unknown creatures in the water. It's terrifying. AHHH. The apocalypse of the heavy rain is here. We're doomed. There are no supplies at home. My best friend, Ember, loves going online and reading novels, especially apocalyptic romance novels. Stuff like The Zombie King falls in love with me, 9 base leaders beat each other to a pulp to compete for me, I'm delicate and soft with a spatial ability, predicting danger in advance and stockpiling goods worth 10 billion. So, she firmly believed these apocalyptic remarks. Coincidentally, at this time, Jacob and brother Scar from apartment 1201 next door decided to go on a 0 yuan purchase. My best friend hit it off with them and planned to go together. She also strongly invited me to go with them, too. At that time, I kindly advised my best friend, Ember, there's not going to be so many doomsdays, it's just rain, and it will stop soon. Don't be poisoned by those novels. What's the difference between going on a 0 yuan purchase now and burglary? Even if, hypothetically, there is an apocalypse, we shouldn't go on a 0 yuan purchase right now. The social order is still intact, and the authorities are still actively carrying out rescue work. We should be patient and trust the authorities. Let's wait for a few more days. If it's still raining after a week, I'll accompany you no matter what you want to do. Okay, my best friend was persuaded by my earnest words and decided not to go on a 0 yuan purchase for the time being. Since we didn't go, Jacob and brother Scar took the 2 women from apartment 1204 with them and headed out into the heavy rain. Around 5 in the morning, the noisy voices woke me and my best friend up. We opened the door a crack and saw that they had actually come back from a 0 yuan purchase. Brother Scar and Jacob were hugging the 2 women, looking beaming with joy as they were dividing the supplies. For the next 2 days, my best friend didn't give me a good look. When I cooked a meal for her, she just picked up the food and banged it around, not taking a single bite. She also complained to me, if it weren't for you, I definitely wouldn't have to eat plain rice and Chinese cabbage. Yes. There was rice at home, as well as some durable vegetables like Chinese cabbage, potatoes, and sweet potatoes, but there were no fresh fruits, vegetables, or meat. If we saved some, it would be enough for my best friend and me to eat for half a month, but she just wasn't satisfied. On the 5th day of the heavy rain, the smell of hot pot wafted from apartment 1201 next door. My best friend decided to go to Jacob's place to mooch off their meal. The 2 female neighbors from apartment 1204 had already arrived there. They humiliated my best friend. They scolded my best friend for not going on a 0 yuan purchase but wanting to take advantage, and they drove my best friend out in the manner of hostesses. At this moment, my best friend's negative emotions reached their peak. When she rushed back home, I was standing by the window, repairing the broken glass in the face of the heavy rain. She roared at me with a ferocious expression. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you stopping me from going on a 0 yuan purchase, I would be the female protagonist. After saying that, she gave me a sudden push while I was repairing the glass. I wasn't prepared and fell from the 12th floor, dying in the dirty rainwater. 3. Freya, are you deaf? What are you spacing out for? I told you to find a big bag. Later we can use it to pack supplies. Ember's disdainful voice interrupted my thoughts. I took a deep breath. quickly racked my brain for a solution, and at the same time, moved my feet to help her find the bag. Since she wants to be the female protagonist so much, of course I have to respect her choice. Having been reborn, I definitely won't stop Ember from going on a 0 yuan purchase again, but the problem is, I don't believe in the doomsday theory. I can't go, and I have to find a way to get out of it. I rummaged through the room and found a huge woven bag. My eyes slid over the fruit knife. And suddenly I thought of a good idea. Ember, I'm really sorry, but I can't go with you guys. I think I've started my period. I stuck my butt out and walked up to Ember, showing her the color of my outer pants. The blood had soaked through, and it was obvious that the flow was quite heavy. Ember grabbed the bag and said to me with a look of disgust, "The end of the world is coming, and you're being so fussy, if you really have to. What's the big deal about getting wet once?" I remained silent to show my unwillingness. Ember stared at me with a sneer. "Don't regret it if you don't go. When everyone else realizes it, the apocalypse will have already officially started, and there won't be any supplies outside. I won't share with you." Then, she impatiently continued to persuade me. "The apocalypse is coming. Do you want to just freeload? Hurry up and come with me." Seeing that I remained unmoved, she finally left in a huff, slamming the door behind her. I hid behind the peephole monitor and noticed that she went straight to Jacob's place in apartment 1201. From the sound recording device, I could vaguely hear their conversation at the door. "Jacob, brother Scar, Freya isn't going, but in the apocalypse novels, a 0 yuan purchase can be very dangerous. There might be other teams competing with us. What should we do?" For my heart skipped a beat. Although I had learned taekwondo for a while before and love working out, so I have better physical strength than an average girl, but there's no way I could fight two men barehanded, with Jacob and brother Scar protecting her. Does it really matter to Ember whether I go on a 0 yuan purchase or not? The answer is no. Therefore, there's only one possibility left: if they encounter danger. Ember wants to use me as a shield. Without me as a shield, two more people soon came to offer themselves. The two girls from apartment 1204 came to the door, hoping that Jacob would take them on a 0 yuan purchase. Jacob and brother Scar were about to refuse because, in their opinion, taking 3 women with 2 men on a 0 yuan purchase would only slow them down. But Ember rolled her eyes and actually smiled and persuaded Jacob to take them along, acting very magnanimous. Only I know how much Ember hates the two girls from apartment 1204. She used to scold them to me every day, saying they were little vixens who only knew how to show off their charm online to seduce men. This trip was destined not to go smoothly, but I was in a difficult situation myself and wouldn't take the initiative to remind anyone. The sky seemed to have a hole in it. In just a short while, the water level rose alarmingly and had already submerged the chest of an adult man. I lay by the window and saw Jacob and brother Scar carry out a kayak and put it into the heavy rain. The 5 of them climbed onto it with difficulty and were about to leave. Other residents in the community heard the noise and stuck their heads out one after another. "Damn, you actually have a kayak. Can you do me a favor and tell my dad to come pick me up? What are you going out for? Didn't the authorities tell us to wait for rescue at home? It's dangerous outside. Come back quickly." Ember, wearing a raincoat and sitting on the kayak, held a kitchen knife in her hand and waved it high up at the building. "The end of the world is coming, and you're all just a bunch of useless people waiting to die. Don't come begging us to take you in when we build our base in the future." Hearing this, the community was in chaos. They seemed to be going to look for supplies. Could it really be the end of the world? As Ember and the others left, some people stared intently at their backs, and a sinister light flashed in their eyes. They pulled over others and started to plot something furtively. Ember, who had read so many apocalypse novels, had forgotten one of the most important things. When a disaster strikes, human nature is the most terrifying thing. Thinking of this, I found some iodine, cleaned the wound on my palm, and wrapped it with a clean cloth. Then I started to transform my home without delay. 5. This house was bought for me by my parents last year. Ember came to me crying, saying that the company she worked for was in trouble and had laid her off, and she had nowhere to live. Ember and I met in university, and I've always regarded her as my best friend, so I asked her to come and live with me for free. It's a building with 2 elevators and 4 apartments on each floor. In apartment 1201 lived Jacob and brother Scar, 2 hoodlums. Every day, a lot of social people would come in and out of their place, eating, drinking, having fun, and shouting loudly until midnight. I complained to the property management and the police many times, but it always ended up going nowhere. In apartment 1204 lived the pair of twin sisters. They were live streamers. Every day, they dressed up beautifully and walked around with their noses in the air. Apartment 1203 was bought by my childhood friend's parents for his future marriage. But since my childhood friend had always been in another province and the house hadn't been fully renovated yet, It had been unoccupied, and there were a lot of building materials and other things stored inside. Our two families were old friends, so my childhood friend gave me a key to help them receive packages. In my previous life, I thought it was just going to rain for a few days and there was no apocalypse, so I had no precautions against Ember and the others, and I didn't ask my childhood friend for help at that time. I always thought the heavy rain would pass soon and there was no need to trouble anyone. This time, even if there's no apocalypse, I have to be prepared and be on guard against Ember. No, be on guard against everyone. Thinking of this, I immediately took out my phone and found my childhood friend's contact information. James, I need your help urgently. 6. Amidst the sound of the heavy rain, on one hand, I kept an eye on the neighbors upstairs and downstairs, fearing that someone might take advantage of my situation and come to disturb me. On the other hand, after getting my childhood friend's consent, I used the key to open his door, checked the packages he had sent over, and moved all the usable things into my house. My childhood friend laughed at me for being overly suspicious, saying that it was just a bit of rain, so why was I making such a big fuss? At the same time, he taught me how to set things up to be safe. I took out 4 steel bars, crossed them and placed them against the walls on both sides of the door, blocking the door completely. Then I took out the horizontal bar that my childhood friend had sent over before, placed it 2 centimeters away from the door, against the walls on both sides, and tightened the screws. My door opened inward. Even if someone tried to break in by force, they would be blocked by these 5 sticks, just in case. I also moved his chainsaw over and plugged it in at the entrance to try it out. It buzzed, and it felt very handy. Even an adult man wouldn't dare to try to take the chainsaw barehanded under such a threat. My windows had anti-theft nets installed, so I wasn't too worried about that. However, I found several big locks from my childhood friend's packages and added a few more locks to the anti-theft windows. Then I used the remaining steel bars to block the inside of the windows. In this way, even if someone cut through the anti-theft net and broke the window, they would still have to cut through the steel bars to get in. I opened the unopened buckets of waterproof glue and painted it all on the walls that had leaked in my previous life. Then I sealed all the windows with waterproof cloth, except that it was a bit dark. There were no other problems. However, my childhood friend told me that he had several boxes of candles at his place. There were also vacuum-packed roast chickens and roast geese, as well as several bags of rice, flour, cooking oil, and even a few pieces of cured meat and 2 boxes of dried fruits. It was said that his parents had prepared these to offer to the god of wealth after the house was renovated. In addition, my childhood friend had also bought several boxes of self-heating hot pots and instant noodles and sent them over before. He had originally planned to come back in a few days to oversee the renovation and eat them himself. Unexpectedly, the heavy rain had disrupted everyone's plans. Now it all benefited me. The heavy rain caused the signal to be intermittent, and it seemed that the call was about to be cut off. My childhood friend suddenly put away his joking tone and said to me in a low voice on the other end of the phone, "Freya, you should have received a red package from me before. Inside it is a tang dao, a kind of traditional Chinese sword that I collected, and an electronic crossbow. These things are very dangerous, and I originally didn't want to tell you. However, we don't know when the heavy rain will stop, so you must protect yourself." 7. After working hard for most of the day and confirming that there were no omissions, I finally felt at ease. I locked my childhood friend's now empty house and went back to my own house to wait peacefully. It was already dark at this time. I knew that there would be countless fierce battles ahead. I had to conserve my strength. After reassuring my parents that I was safe, I charged all 3 power banks that I had taken from my childhood friend's place and my own 2 power banks. Then I sorted out the currently available supplies and hid some in the master bedroom, the guest bedroom, and the living room respectively. Only then did I cook a big pot of rice, stir-fried the remaining bunch of green vegetables at home, and made a dish of potato chunks with cured meat. I happily started to eat. In my previous life, on the 3rd day of the heavy rain, the power and water supply would be cut off. On the 4th day of the heavy rain, the internet and natural gas would be cut off. This was also the reason why Ember became more and more anxious later on, firmly believing that I was blocking her from going on a 0 yuan purchase and preventing her from becoming the female protagonist in an apocalypse novel, and eventually even killed me. But I also firmly believed that the apocalypse was just nonsense. I don't look forward to the apocalypse, nor do I want to become the so-called savior or female protagonist, because I still have my parents, friends. I want to live to see them. Now that there is heavy rain all over the country and the authorities are short-staffed, but they must be on their way here, I believe that I will definitely wait for the rescue. All I can do now is to try my best to save myself and hold fast to that line of human nature. Don't seek trouble, don't be afraid of trouble, and protect myself well. After thinking all this through, I didn't dare to go back to my room to sleep, for fear that I wouldn't be able to hear the sounds outside in time, so I brought a quilt over, held the tang dao in my hand, and dozed off lightly on the sofa. I don't know how long I slept, but I was awakened by a heart-rending scream. The sound pierced through the rainy night, extremely terrifying. 8. I took out my phone and checked the time. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. By now, it was already the second day of the torrential rain. The time was exactly the same as in my previous life. I tiptoed to the window and looked down through the blurred rain curtain. Vaguely, I could see that the kayak was blocked outside our building, and there were 3 people sitting on it. The water level was almost up to the first floor, so now the neighbors were all standing on the corridor of the second floor. From time to time, several hands stretched out from the building, seemingly trying to grab the things on the kayak. Jacob and Brother Scar were vigilantly protecting the bags of supplies, and Ember was holding a long watermelon knife in her hand. Staring coldly at everyone in the building, in the middle of the 2 groups of people, a young girl was struggling in the flood. She seemed about to climb up, but was firmly pressed back down by several long poles that stretched out from the building. A neighbor said, "Jacob, Brother Scar, as long as you share half of the supplies with us, we'll let the sister go." Yes. The girl being held in the water was the younger sister of the twin sisters from apartment 1204. The scream I heard earlier was also from the younger sister. No, why is only the younger sister back? Where is the elder sister? Jacob and Brother Scar exchanged a look and didn't say anything. The next second, however, Ember raised the long knife and slashed fiercely at the girl in the water. The girl let out a short scream, quickly lost her breath, and sank into the filthy floodwater. Blood splashed all over Ember's face, making her look like a ghost. But she sneered and said to the neighbors blocking their way in front of her, "You still want to threaten us to hand over the supplies with her, with the end of the world coming? I'm not a saint. If anyone wants to grab them, they have to ask the knife in my hand first." 9. I had just managed to calm down my wildly beating heart. There were already rustling footsteps outside the corridor. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and my hand holding the tang dao tightened more and more. Then there came a knock on the door. "Freya, open the door." It was Ember. Through the peephole monitor, I could clearly see the blood on Ember's face. Not far behind her, Jacob and Brother Scar were hurriedly moving the supplies into apartment 1201. The rainwater and blood on them dripped onto the ground, glistening coldly, and the other half of the supplies was at Ember's feet. She seemed to want to move the supplies into my house. Tough people are afraid of ruthless people, and ruthless people are afraid of those who don't care about their lives. Ember's slash had intimidated everyone. Those greedy neighbors didn't dare to stop her anymore. Even Jacob and Brother Scar looked at her with new eyes and were faintly a bit afraid of her. Of course, I was also afraid of her, so I wouldn't let her step into this house again, seeing that I didn't open the door and didn't make a sound. Ember wiped the knife impatiently. "Freya, don't play dead. I know you're at home. Open the door." That's right. In such heavy rain, I had nowhere else to go but stay at home. Seeing that I was still silent, Ember suddenly raised the long knife and stabbed it into the peephole monitor. The display screen inside the door went black immediately. The monitor was broken and could only be used as an ordinary peephole now. I suppressed my wildly beating heart and stared quietly at Ember outside the door, who seemed a bit crazy. Under the dim light, half of her face was hidden in the shadow, holding a bunch of keys. She brought them close to the peephole and whispered like a devil, "Freya, do you think that if you don't open the door for me, I'll have nowhere to live? You still don't know, do you? Those 2 little bitches from apartment 1204 are both dead." 10. It turned out that Jacob and Brother Scar originally planned to go on a 0 yuan purchase at the supermarket, but unexpectedly, as soon as the heavy rain started last night, one supermarket had already quickly gathered up its inventory and transferred it away. The other 2 supermarkets had already been occupied by several other teams, and there was a big brawl in front of the supermarkets. Ember's group consisted of 2 men and 3 women, and their combat power couldn't compare with these teams, so they left immediately when they saw this. Therefore, their 0 yuan purchase plan failed. Going to a farther place was not safe, and the kayak couldn't make it there either. At this moment, a malicious light suddenly flashed in Ember's eyes, and she smiled and said, "I know there's a very remote grocery store nearby. It's run by an elderly couple, and they also have a little grandson with them. It's easy to do a 0 yuan purchase there. Moreover, these people are only focused on the big supermarkets and won't think about the grocery store. How about we go there and take a look?" So the group of 5 people turned and went to the grocery store. Ember's recommendation of this grocery store was not accidental. A month ago, Ember went to this grocery store to buy something and asked the shopkeeper's wife to give her a discount of 5 yuan. The shopkeeper's wife refused, so Ember came back and complained to me for a long time, and even deliberately posted a moment on social media cursing this store. The grocery store was located in a low-lying area. When Ember and the others arrived, they found that the water level had already flooded the entrance of the grocery store. The elderly couple had carried a lot of supplies in big and small bags onto the roof, and their little grandson was standing beside them. They happily waved at the kayak approaching from afar, thinking that they had finally waited for the rescue. Unexpectedly, what they waited for was the devil. Ember and the others robbed them of all their supplies during the fight. The little grandson was pushed into the flood by Ember and carried away. The elderly couple rushed forward with their eyes wide with anger, wanting to die together with them, but Ember quickly pulled the elder sister of the girls from apartment 1204 as a shield. While dodging, the elderly couple pounced on the elder sister, so the three of them lost their balance and were also carried away by the flood in the heavy rain and disappeared, based on her experience from reading apocalypse novels. Ember guessed that there would definitely be neighbors coming to snatch goods, therefore, on the way back, she schemed to let the younger sister of the girls from apartment 1204 sit in the front. As soon as the kayak arrived downstairs, a group of neighbors pulled the younger sister sitting at the front off the boat. They used this to threaten Jacob and the others to hand over the supplies. But no one expected that this was actually Ember's plan to use others to kill. If the person who went on the 0 yuan purchase with them was me, then the one who would die would be me. 11. After hearing the whole story, my disgust for Ember reached its peak, but she didn't know my feelings and still thought I was the good best friend who let her manipulate me before. She even rolled her eyes and chose to continue coaxing me. Freya, after all, you're my good best friend, now I have supplies. And Jacob and Brother Scar also trust me very much. Come out and work with me to develop our apocalypse career. In troubled times, heroes emerge. We will definitely be able to establish our own influence. At that time, I'll be the base leader, and you'll be the deputy base leader. Whatever we want will be within our reach, and we could even rule a country. Listening to her words that were deeply poisoned by novels, I almost couldn't help laughing out loud. Who on earth gave her such confidence, seeing that I kept pretending to be dead? Ember kicked my door several times in anger. Finally, she had no choice but to drag the heavy supply bag and walk in the direction of apartment 1204. In the empty corridor, only the winding bloodstains and her crazy words were left. From today on, apartment 1204 will be my initial base. My apocalypse journey officially starts from here. 12. On the third day of the torrential rain, as expected, the power and water supply were cut off. Fortunately, I had collected drinking water in advance. And I had 5 power banks with me. There were also several boxes of candles at home. If I used them sparingly, it would be enough for me to last for a long time. After waking up, I hurriedly turned on the internet, thinking I would see overwhelming apocalypse remarks, but I didn't expect that a trending topic exploded on the whole network and even overshadowed the unease caused by the power and water outages. Ember was on the trending topic and was being cyberbullied. The cause was that someone released a video. It showed the scene of Ember pushing the little boy into the water from the roof in order to grab the supplies. There was also the scene of Ember pulling the elder sister of the girls from apartment 1204 to block the knife and then killing her together with the elderly couple. It turned out that the person who released the video was standing at home on a high-rise building, using a long focus lens to take pictures around to see the situation of the flood and the heavy rain. Unexpectedly, they captured yesterday's grocery store. Then, Ember, wrapped in a black raincoat, was called the Flood Butcher by netizens, and the whole network was looking for who she was. Heaven's net is wide, and though the mesh is loose, it lets nothing through. Finally, enthusiastic netizens dug up all her information. Many people cursed her for being vicious, saying that it had only been 3 days of rain, and she had already killed 3 people. They said she was cruel and ruthless and told her to surrender herself quickly, so someone immediately announced, saying that Ember had actually killed 4 people. There was one more who died downstairs in our community. It seemed that this must have been announced by a neighbor. The official urgently made a statement online, saying that they would definitely find out the truth. They also called the property management, saying that the situation was urgent and they couldn't get here for the time being. They asked the property management to help lock Ember in the house alone first, and they would come to our community to take Ember away for investigation after the rain stopped. But Ember didn't take these things seriously at all. Not only did she tacitly admit the fact of the killing, she even fought against netizens online and brazenly said, "When the end of the world comes, there will be deaths. It's their honor to sacrifice for me, the female protagonist of the apocalypse." 13. In the end, however, the property management still didn't lock Ember up, because, after the power outage, most people's phones quickly ran out of power. There were many fewer online justice warriors, and Ember wasn't afraid of being scolded at all. The heavy rain made the sky extremely dark, and people in the homeowners group were asking whose house had candles. I looked at the box of candles at my feet and didn't say anything, but Ember jumped out at this moment. "Ember, I have candles at my house. I got them from the grocery store yesterday. Later, you can all come to my house and queue up to get them. You can also get some biscuits and snacks, although it's not enough for everyone to be full. A few pieces for each person can also fill their stomachs a bit." Neighbor A, really? Wow. You're so kind, Ember. Of course it's true. Moreover, in the future, we can take you to collect supplies together. We can form a community base and will definitely shine brightly in the apocalypse. Jacob, Brother Scar. Don't you think so, Jacob? Well, what Ember said is all true, Brother Scar. We're in Shinwa community. How about naming Ember's base the Ember Base? Neighbor B. I'll be the first to join, Ember. Don't be in a hurry. I have one thing I need your help with. As for what this favor was, I didn't know, because I was kicked out of the homeowners group. It seemed that the trouble Ember was going to cause next was related to me again. I checked the doors and windows over and over again, gripped the automatic crossbow and the Tang Dao in my hand tightly, and stared fixedly at the door. Sure enough, not long after, there came heavy footsteps in the corridor. It seemed that many people were rushing towards me. Then, Ember's smiling voice came from the door. Freya. The houses above the 6th floor have been requisitioned by our Ember base. Please move to a floor below the 6th floor. Also, you can't take the supplies in your house with you. It's convenient for me to distribute them uniformly. 14. At this time, the torrential rain was still continuing, and the water level had completely flooded the 2nd floor and was spreading to the 3rd floor. In my previous life, I died on the 4th day of the heavy rain. At that time, the heavy rain didn't stop, and the water level had once reached up to the 5th floor. Therefore, moving to a lower floor at this time was a direct death sentence. But now, the gangsters Jacob and Brother Scar were obeyed her. The neighbors who had witnessed her killing the younger sister of the girls from apartment 1204 downstairs had also accepted her overtures. Through the peephole, I saw a group of big men had pried open the door lock of my childhood friend's house in apartment 1203 and were seizing the place. But when they found it was empty, they could only curse and say it was unlucky. So, led by Ember, they turned around and blocked my door again. It seemed that I wouldn't be able to get away with it so easily today. The municipal authorities are still actively carrying out rescue work, and it will soon be our community's turn. Who gave you the right to requisition the houses? On the shoe cabinet in the entrance hall. That Tang Dao was placed in my palm. I was holding that electronic crossbow. Ember pretended to persuade me. Freya, I know you've always been withdrawn and selfish, but now, with the flood upon us, we should unite and deal with the natural disaster and the end of the world. After requisitioning your house, people who contribute more to our base will live in it. We will also distribute more of your supplies to you. You should be happy about that. Through the peephole, I saw her hypocritical face and couldn't help laughing coldly. It has nothing to do with me. Jacob and Brother Scar were angry and kicked the door. Ember, don't waste your breath on her. Just pry it open. Ember stepped back, and a group of big and burly men started the door-breaking work. Bang, 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 bang. Fortunately, the steel bars and the horizontal bar I had set up before worked. When my parents decorated the house, they were prepared for danger in times of peace. And this door itself was made of anti-theft materials. At this time, except for the huge noise, there was no sign of the door opening at all. Seeing that one plan didn't work, Ember's eyes flickered, and she came up with another plan. Jacob, you stay here and lead the people to break the door. Brother Scar, you lead the people to the balcony of apartment 1203 and see if you can open the window of Freya's house from there. I used to live in Freya's house. There's still a lot of rice and potatoes in her house, which is enough for the brothers to have a good meal. Moreover, on the 12th floor, the heavy rain shouldn't be able to reach this high anyway, so please work hard to capture this place. This is the first battle of our Ember base. Come on, everyone. 15. If it weren't for the different stances and if I didn't know her true nature, I would really want to praise her as the female protagonist of an apocalypse novel. Unfortunately, all her benefits were built on the sacrifice of others. Seeing that there were clanging sounds coming from outside the doors, windows, and glass, Brother Scar clung to the window of my house along the air conditioner outdoor unit. He was holding an axe in his hand, with a ferocious smile on his face, and he slammed the axe down on the window. With a bang, the stainless steel anti-theft window collided with the axe. Brother Scar loosened his grip on the axe, and it fell straight down. The heavy rain made his feet slippery, and he angrily roared at me, "You bitch. Just you wait, when I get in, I'll make your life a living hell." Then he turned his head and said to the people on the balcony, "Bring me the chainsaw." A weak reply came from the next door. "Brother Scar, the power is out. The chainsaw can't be used." Immediately after, Ember's vicious voice came from inside again. "It's okay. Just now, one of our brothers said that he has a cutting machine at home, which is powered by a storage battery. They are about to bring it up. This mere anti-theft window is no big deal. It can be used just right. Brother Scar, you smashed the glass first." Then, Brother Scar took a sledgehammer, reached through the anti-theft window, and smashed the glass in front of me hammer by hammer. Soon, there came the click sound of the glass breaking. Looking at this group of scoundrels, I could no longer hold back my anger. Sitting around and waiting for death would only lead to death, so I took a few steps forward vigorously. and pulled open the transparent waterproof cloth in the window. The violent wind and rain immediately swept towards me. I turned on the switch of the automatic crossbow, squinted my eyes, and aimed at Brother Scar outside the window. 16. With a whoosh sound, a beam of arrow light shot towards Brother Scar and hit his raised right leg right on the mark. I sneered and raised the crossbow a little higher, aiming at his neck, and said, "If there is a next time, it won't just be your leg that gets shot." Brother Scar let out continuous screams of pain. While he panicked and dodged the crossbow that I raised again, he shouted at the next door, "Pull me up, quickly pull me up, this bitch actually dared to hurt me. Jason, you go and break the window for me." Brother Scar, I don't dare, she has a weapon, and that thing is really fast. After this incident, the people under Ember temporarily stopped their actions. No matter how high one's martial arts skills are, they are still afraid of a kitchen knife. Without guns and ammunition, this automatic crossbow of mine can be regarded as the weapon with the strongest lethality. While there was still internet, I immediately sent a message to my childhood friend to express my gratitude. My childhood friend, however, reminded me not to relax. The arrows in the crossbow would also run out. In case something happened later, I could only rely on myself. The torrential rain poured down, and I didn't sleep all night. The fourth day arrived with my nerves so tightly strung. I carefully checked and, as expected, the internet was cut off. Now I was completely cut off from the outside world. There was also no natural gas at home. Fortunately, there were quite a lot of foods that I had moved from my childhood friend's house. I happily opened a box of self-heating hot pot, poured in the water stored in 3 large buckets, removed the seasonings with a strong chili oil flavor, and added a little of the rice that I had cooked the day before. Then I started to eat. Today was the date of my death in my previous life, and I couldn't afford to be careless. After the meal, I feigned sleep on the sofa in the living room. There came a noisy commotion outside the door. I held a knife in my left hand and a crossbow in my right hand, and quickly walked towards the door. "Ember, what right do you have to requisition our houses? Where is the property management? Why doesn't the property management take care of this?" These poor neighbors who had been honestly waiting for rescue didn't know that the property management had long been in cahoots with Ember. "We all paid for these houses. Since that's the case, then you give us the high-rise houses to live in. Do you really think you're some kind of queen? Get lost. If you dare to snatch my house, I'll snatch yours." Through the peephole, I could see the whole situation. It turned out that the water level outside had spread to the 5th floor, and the torrential rain was actually still continuing, because she didn't manage to snatch my house. Ember, in a fit of anger, called on her lackeys to go and snatch the houses of other people upstairs and downstairs. There were many people under her who lived on the lower floors. That's why they responded so quickly to Ember's suggestion of snatching houses. 17. In the corridor, those furious neighbors besieged the 12th floor. The number of people on both sides was not much different, and the battle was on the verge of breaking out. Ember walked out of the door with a cold smile. Jacob and Brother Scar were standing on either side of her, like a real person in a high position. She looked down at the group of neighbors in front of her who were arguing for their houses. "Everything I do is for the Ember base. If you are willing to join our base, I will distribute the houses and supplies uniformly. Of course, we don't accept the old, the weak, women, and children." How ridiculous. Whose family doesn't have children or elderly people? Wasn't she a woman herself? She kept saying that she was acting in the name of saving the world, but she was doing these disgusting things. Of course, if you don't want to, in the apocalypse, the saints are the first to be killed. Sorry, I'm not a saint. For the peace and quiet of our Ember base, you can all just die. In her eyes, killing people seemed as easy as killing an ant. As soon as she finished speaking, the shouts of killing rang out. The people of the Ember base brought out the cutting machine mentioned earlier. With the power of the storage battery, it became the most powerful weapon on the 12th floor. They were ruthless. Each person held a watermelon knife as long as their arm and slashed ferociously. For a moment, the blood flowed like a river, and severed limbs were flying around. Countless people fell, and countless others wailed on the ground, compared with the people of the Ember base. The other neighbors who were disorganized and undisciplined were ultimately a bit inferior. Finally, only a few neighbors fled in a hurry, staggering downstairs, but they were caught up by the people of the Ember base. Amid the pleas for mercy of these neighbors, the people of the base threw them from the building into the torrential rain. Just like me in my previous life, the families of these dead neighbors, upon learning of these sad news, could only curl up on the lower floors and wait for death in silence. Now, in the whole building, except for me, it was all Ember's domain. 18. In the evening, I safely passed the time of my death in my previous life. What's even more delightful is, the rain that had been falling for 4 days and 4 nights suddenly stopped. The water level also stopped rising and stayed at the 6th floor. I guessed that perhaps this rain disaster was coming to an end. I heard the clattering footsteps coming from the next door. It turned out that Ember decided to send Jacob to lead people out to look for supplies. In the first 2 days, the kayak was likely to be capsized in the torrential rain, and it was especially unsafe. There were so many of them, and the food they had snatched from the neighbors had all been consumed. If they didn't go out now, they would really starve to death. But the people who went out soon came back in a panic, saying that although the rain had stopped just now, a landslide occurred on a nearby mountain, and the turbid and surging flood was raging outside the building. Not to mention going out of the community to look for supplies, they couldn't even get to the other buildings in the same community. In just a short while, 2 of the people who went out had died, both of whom were carried away by the flood. There were too many people in the Ember base to accommodate, and they had been squeezing in the corridor these 2 days. Therefore, I could hear a lot of their conversations. After listening to these reports, Ember's increasingly emaciated face suddenly turned towards the direction of my house. She stared fixedly at my door, as if calculating something. My sense of unease grew stronger and stronger. Suddenly, she hooked her thin lips. "Brothers, we can't go out for now, and we can't find any food. According to my experience from reading novels, this kind of natural disaster and apocalypse are continuous. Now that the rain has stopped, it should soon be the apocalypse of high temperature or the apocalypse of extreme cold. If it's the apocalypse of high temperature, the flood will be evaporated. If it's the apocalypse of extreme cold, the flood will freeze and turn into ice. We all have a chance to escape. What we need to do now is to hold on until the next apocalypse arrives. So, food is the most important thing. If we're lucky, there might still be a little food in my good best friend Freya's house. If not, in troubled times, we shouldn't be too particular. Whether it's Freya or those surviving family members downstairs, they can all be our reserved food during this period." As the last word fell, the whole place was silent. My heart also trembled again and again. Ember, how dare she? 19. But hunger is the most unbearable pain. When people are extremely hungry, they can do anything. So, a group of men with green eyes began to take various tools and smash the walls of my house in the corridor. The cutting machine stained with blood also came in handy again at this time. Another part of the people rushed downstairs excitedly. I knew that they were going to catch those old, weak, women, and children. I wasn't sure if it was my illusion or not. Under their pounding, I actually felt that the whole building was shaking. The walls also gradually showed cracks. Fortunately, those old, weak, women, and children who were caught were not killed immediately. Ember asked someone to clean up a small room in my childhood friend's house in apartment 1203 and locked them in. She then said meaningfully, "If there are supplies in Freya's house, we won't have to take the last step. If not, then everyone, be prepared mentally." All the people's green eyes immediately shot towards my house, as if I had become the last hope of this pack of hungry wolves. 20. On the 5th day of the torrential rain, at 3 o'clock in the morning, with a boom sound, a hole was made in the wall. A ferocious and ugly face leaned close to the hole and looked at me inside the house. "Supplies, here I come." I pursed my lips and didn't say anything, but the electronic crossbow in my hand had already accurately shot towards the man's arm that was stretched in. With 3 consecutive arrows, the man howled in pain and withdrew his arm. In the corridor outside, Ember's voice also became clearer and clearer. "You useless thing, go up. Even with the human wave tactic, we have to take her down." After the commotion, the hole in the wall became bigger and bigger. One man after another came to crawl through the hole, and the arrows in my hand were getting fewer and fewer until the last one was used up. Ember suddenly let out a soft laugh. "Freya, you don't have any arrows left, do you?" She was still the one who knew me best. Unfortunately, she had ultimately betrayed this understanding. After this round of defense, I also became calmer and calmer. I quickly threw down the empty electronic crossbow, opened the knife sheath, clasped my hands together, and gripped the sharp tang dao in my hand tightly. "Ember, have you forgotten why you became friends with me in the first place?" "Because I came from a background of learning taekwondo. We first met when I helped drive away the drunk hooligan who was harassing her. Without arrows, I could still use the knife. Without the knife, I still had so many steel bars on the wall, and I still had my fists and legs. In this life, I will definitely protect myself well." The hole in the wall was very small. While they tried to expand it, they continuously sent people trying to crawl in. The knife in my hand struck at them without any set pattern, and I also cleverly avoided the dangerous parts. The blood dyed the whole wall red, and in the whole space, there were only the men's rapid breathing sounds. Damn it, this woman is crazy. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm almost starving to death. I'm going to find those people who were locked up. He was going to find those old, weak, women, and children. I gritted my teeth, picked up a few biscuits on the table, and threw them out of the hole. I said harshly, "Your opponent is me." It wasn't that I was being a saint, it was just that I could delay for a while, and every bit of delay counted. I anxiously looked at the watch on my wrist. When the pointer slowly jumped to 5 o'clock in the morning, outside the window, finally, a whistle sound that came from far away and gradually approached was heard. Everyone spontaneously put down their knives and rushed to the window to take a look. A huge military cruise ship was slowly approaching here. Extra story 1. On the 5th day of the torrential rain, we waited for the rescue. From the military cruise ship came a comforting voice that made people burst into tears. "Sorry. Fellow countrymen, we're late. The natural disaster of the torrential rain has ended, and you are safe now. Whether it was the people of the Ember Base, those old, weak, sick, and disabled, or me, everyone wept with joy. Only Ember, with a pale face, muttered to herself, "No, no, how could the apocalypse end? I'm the female protagonist. I haven't even shown my abilities yet." A pair of silver handcuffs locked her white and slender hands. "Ember, you are suspected of murdering multiple people. Please come with us." All the people of the so-called Ember Base were imprisoned at the bottom of the cruise ship. We survivors were taken to wash up, eat, and rest, too. On the day of the trial, I appeared in court with the evidence recorded on my phone. What Ember didn't know is that although the power and internet were cut off, the power banks that I had taken from my childhood friend came in handy, coincidentally, at this time. Jacob and Brother Scar from apartment 1201 next door decided to go on a zero-yuan purchase. The video of her going on a zero-yuan purchase at the grocery store and killing that poor grandmother, grandson, and the elder sister of the girls from apartment 1204 had long been widely spread on the internet. When the video was just exposed, thinking it was the apocalypse, she blatantly admitted her crime orally. As for the younger sister of the girls from apartment 1204 who was killed by her downstairs, there were also surviving neighbors as witnesses. In addition, the people of the Ember Base, in order to reduce their crimes, had long shifted all the blame onto Ember. Even Jacob and Brother Scar said in disdain, "That woman is a lunatic, arrogant and conceited. She kills anyone she sees." At first, we thought she really had some abilities, so we thought of using her to get more people and supplies, so that she could lead us to show our abilities in the apocalypse. Since there is no apocalypse now, why should we still help her hide the truth? So, with both human witnesses and material evidence available, this major case was immediately widely publicized on the internet. The vicious reputation of the Flood Butcher also once became well known throughout the world. To appease the public, Ember was sentenced to death and executed immediately. 3. In addition, this torrential rain washed away many scoundrels. Some people maliciously maxed out their credit cards, some people committed burglary, some people committed arson and murder, and some people carried out malicious zero-yuan purchases. Although their crimes were not as serious as Ember's, everyone received legal judgment. As for me, although I injured many people, but from the beginning to the end of the incident, I secretly recorded videos with my phone. I was acting in self-defense. On the day when the incident was finally settled, I walked out of the court, although the flood and the torrential rain had ransacked the once beautiful city. But fortunately, this was indeed not the apocalypse, just an abnormal natural disaster, and everyone after the disaster was working hard to rebuild their homes. Sweat hung on their foreheads, shining brightly in the sun. I walked towards my parents and my childhood friend who were waiting for me on the other side of the road. Holding hands, we walked together in the direction of the new home. Story 2. 5 days before the apocalypse, someone spread the news of the end of the world on the internet, and I, somewhat confused, hoarded a large amount of supplies. I intended to survive the apocalypse with these supplies, but unexpectedly, I was betrayed and pushed off the rooftop by my malicious best friend. In my next life, I am determined to survive until the end. 1. A cold dagger pierced my back, and a voice whispered in my ear, "Who knows when this apocalypse will end? You're just wasting food by living, better off dead." Then, with a kick, I was sent tumbling down from the rooftop. As I fell, my eyes gradually lost their luster, the world turned dark, and I lost consciousness. After an unknown amount of time, a familiar voice reached my ears. "Lydia, look. That idiot is spreading the news of the apocalypse on the internet again. I wonder if they've gone mad from watching too much TV, actually believing in an apocalypse." Lydia is my name, but wasn't I killed by my malicious best friend and thrown off the roof? What is happening? And this familiar voice, isn't it that of my malicious best friend, looking around at the familiar dorm? Memories long buried in my mind began to resurface. At this moment, I finally understood. I had been reborn. Back to before the outbreak of the apocalypse. "Lydia, why aren't you speaking? You don't really believe that idiot's words, do you?" Seeing me distracted and unwilling to speak, my friend Sarah wrapped her arm around me, leaning her face against my shoulder and asked, "In my previous life, I liked watching apocalyptic movies. Upon hearing the news, I thought it was wise to stock up on supplies, spending 6 months' worth of living expenses on rice, flour, and oil, which I stored in a rented house outside the school. After the apocalypse broke out, Sarah pleaded bitterly for me to take her in. Valuing our friendship, I risked the food shortage to help her, but who knew, within days, she would brutally turn against me, acting out a real-life version of the farmer and the snake. Now, living again, seeing her seemingly innocent appearance but knowing her ugly true nature, I felt nauseous. However, I held it in, as it was not yet time to let her suspect anything. Do you think I'd be foolish enough to believe such things? I was just thinking about the final exams. It's getting late. I should head to my elective class, and you can rest here in the dorm. I made up an excuse on the spot, which was timely because I had a class in the afternoon, so she wouldn't suspect anything. As I closed the door, I heard Sarah's voice rise faintly within the room. Just because she has better grades and looks a bit prettier, one day, I'll make sure she's beneath my feet. Initially, I thought her betrayal was due to the complicated human nature during the apocalypse, but it turned out, it was all her pretense. She had been envious of me from the start, never truly wanting to be friends. Fortunately, having been reborn, I saw through it all, without my help. Let's see how she survives the apocalypse, too. According to my memory, the news about the apocalypse was posted on the internet 5 days before it erupted. I don't know if the person who posted it was reborn like me, but the message appeared on all social platforms, and no one believed it. Even the poster almost got in trouble. Who would believe such baseless claims? Learning from the past, I just commented no harm in being prepared under the post using an alias, and then I disappeared from the scene. Whether anyone believed it or not, it no longer concerned me. There were still 5 days left in my previous life. Due to lack of money and uncertainty about whether the apocalypse would actually happen, I only spent half a term's living expenses on some basic supplies, which barely got me through a short period before I tragically died at Sarah's hands. After being reborn, naturally, I would prepare everything thoroughly. Although I hardly had any money on me, my good credit made borrowing a breeze. With just one loan, I effortlessly secured several $100,000 once I had the funds. The next step was to construct a sturdy shelter. The house I rented was about 5 kilometers from the school, located in a neighborhood born from the economic bubble. It was a remote area with a low occupancy rate. The building I lived in had 18 floors, with only 2 apartments on each floor. According to what I knew, the apartment opposite was also for rent, but it remained unoccupied even as the apocalypse approached. Now, I planned to rent the opposite apartment as well and transform it along with my current one into a shelter. I contacted the agent and told him a classmate urgently needed to rent the apartment, which prompted him to leave the keys in the mailbox downstairs after I transferred him 6 months' rent. Given that rentals were rare in that complex, the agent was naturally thrilled to make a deal. I didn't rush to pick up the keys downstairs. Instead, I went back home first and started to plan my next steps with pen and paper. Essentials like food, water, and medicine had to be prepared, but the most crucial part was how to transport these supplies without attracting attention. In my previous life, I hadn't bought much, and since the occupancy in the complex was low, a few bags of rice and flour didn't raise any eyebrows. However, delivering supplies by the truckload to the complex would definitely be noticed. I needed a plan. As I pondered, I listed out all the items I needed to buy in a notebook. There was a lot to prepare, especially since I had experienced the apocalypse in my previous life and knew which issues couldn't be overlooked. But now, with only 5 days, even though I knew exactly what was needed, I had to consider both time and cost. After writing the shopping list, I started by cleaning up the room. I threw out all the clutter that was just taking up space without any use. But when I saw the contents of a black bag left under the bed by a previous tenant, who had forgotten it and never showed up despite saying he would, I hesitated. Let it be, it might come in handy. It took me 3 hours and several trips to dispose of all the useless stuff. Next, I had to figure out how to transport the supplies without anyone noticing. The residency rate in the complex was already low, and there were only a few security guards. Plus, with most young people at work during the day, the guard monitoring the CCTV often fell asleep. I quietly made my way to the underground parking lot, adjusted all the cameras that could potentially capture my actions, and, ensuring that no one would notice, I began my plan. Firstly, as a standard procedure and to make my hideout secure, I had the construction team replace all the windows with the strongest available on the market under the guise of preparing a marital home. They were reinforced and fitted with one-way film, following the survival novel's guidelines. Even though I lived on the top floor and it was hard to see inside without the film, in an age of technological explosions, the potential dangers were too vast. Anyone with a telescope or a drone could easily become a threat. Failure often stems from overlooking the small details, so I had to consider everything. As for the door, it was replaced with a blast-resistant one, though its effectiveness remained to be proven. Meanwhile, I secretly had workers install some solar panels. I wasn't expecting a luxurious life post-apocalypse. Having just enough power to run essential electronics and surveillance would suffice. Using the urgency of an impending marriage as a cover, and paying double the market rate, I set about securing my future in this precarious world. The construction team assured me that they would complete the work within 3 days. The security in this residential area is quite poor. With a low occupancy rate in this building, one can simply enter through the underground garage and take the elevator without encountering the property management or security. All the young people have gone to work. As for the elderly who have nothing better to do than to wander around, a simple activity like distributing eggs at the entrance would surely attract them, having discussed the renovation requirements. I paid the deposit to the construction team and then focused all my efforts on stocking up on supplies. In the post-apocalyptic stories I've read, protagonists often concoct various reasons to buy water and food from the supermarket to avoid arousing suspicion, yet such actions are ironically conspicuous. Buying large amounts of water and food in the supermarket would certainly raise eyebrows. I found some local wholesalers online and ordered water, various canned foods, compressed biscuits, individual rations, and items like dried meat and mini hot pots, arranging for delivery in 3 days. Compared to supermarkets, these wholesalers not only offer cheaper goods but also routinely deliver to various retail outlets, so my large order wouldn't draw their attention. Bigger clients would be their main focus. Besides water, I didn't order much of the other items, just 10 boxes of each. Firstly, renting and renovating the apartment had already cost me a significant amount, leaving me with little cash on hand. Secondly, items like mini hot pots aren't exactly economical or sustainable like grains. Isn't it much better to fry a bag of rice or flour, which can last a long time? In a post-apocalyptic world, survival is what matters, not luxury. I visited a grain and oil wholesale market farther away and ordered 30 bags of flour and 50 bags of rice, each weighing 20 kilograms. I also bought ample supplies of oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar. With delivery scheduled for 4 days later, I also purchased several boxes of high-calorie or nutritionally complete items like chocolate, soy milk powder, and baby formula. As for toiletries like sanitary pads, toothbrushes, and toothpaste, as well as some common medicines, none of which are restricted, I distributed my purchases across several pharmacies, buying just a few boxes at each, which went unnoticed. After resolving the supplies issue, I returned home exhausted and lay down on the bed, thoroughly enjoying the rest. During this time, Sarah called me, asking in her sycophantic manner why I hadn't returned to the dormitory after class. I dismissively told her I was out and wouldn't return today, then hung up. Tomorrow the house would be renovated, and I tried hard to recall everything that happened in my previous life to see if there were any oversights. With these supplies, I could survive for quite a long time, but no one knows when the crisis will end. Canned foods and dried meats generally have a long shelf life. Self-heating hot pots and similar items can last up to 3 years. Indeed, in a post-apocalyptic scenario, one doesn't need to eat well. Long-term lack of fresh fruits or vegetables can be compensated with vitamin supplements. However, no matter how much you store, there will come a day when it runs out. What then? Sustainable living and self-sufficiency are what I should be considering. Suddenly, I felt that I had bought too little, and even thought of utilizing the rooftop terrace. I spent another night carefully thinking everything over, jotting down all conceivable necessities until my head ached, and then I fell asleep. After a night's rest, my mind was refreshed. The next morning, after handing over the keys to the workers, I continued with my purchasing plans. I found a new grain and oil wholesale market and ordered 10 bags each of soybeans, red beans, and green beans. These beans could not only be cooked directly for meals, but also provide essential nutrients. I can still grow bean sprouts. As for the rooftop, I hadn't figured out how to use it effectively, but I still went ahead and bought seeds, soil, and fertilizer. My approach was, be mentally prepared, act later. After preparing the food, the next thing to prepare was weapons. I bought some self-defense weapons popular among single women online, like anti-wolf spray and stun batons. I was well aware that these items might not be very useful to me, but holding them gave me a bit of extra security, and I also stocked up on things like drone batteries. Once everything was ready, I returned to school to continue my classes. Sarah kept asking what I had been up to these past few days, but I brushed her off with various excuses. Previously, I would never have kept such things from her. 3 days passed quickly, and the construction team called me to come and inspect their work. After checking the newly fortified doors and windows, I promptly paid the final installment and notified the wholesalers to start delivering the supplies I had ordered. The local ladies were slowed down by their stockpile of eggs, and batch after batch of their goods were also delivered. Everything was moving in the right direction. Just when I thought I could sneak all the supplies into my home unnoticed, the unexpected happened. Why did you buy so much stuff? You don't actually believe those online doomsday predictions, do you? I was busy directing the workers to move things into my house when I heard a voice from behind. I turned around. It was someone I had seen a few times, a resident of our building and apparently a relationship broadcaster, someone of a minor internet celebrity. He hardly ever left his apartment. But today, for some reason, I ran into him in the underground garage. Bad luck, I muttered to myself. Turning back to him, I smiled and said, "Oh, it's nothing much. I'm about to graduate, and I'm hosting a party with my classmates tomorrow. Just getting everything ready ahead of time." I see. He didn't say much else, though his eyes kept darting to the boxes in the workers' hands, trying to make out what was inside. After realizing he couldn't tell, he left the garage. It seems impossible to keep this a secret from everyone. Luckily, the grain and oil were already moved up, and these were just chocolates and dried meats. During our conversation, I made a show of sending voice messages to several classmates, trying to make him believe my story so he wouldn't covet my supplies if the apocalypse did arrive. After this minor episode, no other incidents occurred. Under my direction, the delivery staff efficiently moved all the supplies to my upstairs room. In the following days, I purchased 2 door barricades and quietly installed numerous security cameras throughout the building. After adjusting the cameras to ensure stable signal and coverage, I never went out again. 2 days later at noon, I simply ate something and then sat by the window, quietly waiting for the apocalypse to arrive. In my previous life, I was also sitting here waiting for the apocalypse. Only back then I was worried that if the online rumors were nonsense, I might have to survive on the grains in my room for the rest of the year. No, I was certain the apocalypse would come. At exactly 2 p.m., the bright sunny sky suddenly darkened, the golden sun visibly turning a sinister black-red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone who noticed this phenomenon was stunned and looked up at the sky. Many people took photos with their phones and posted this strange occurrence on various social media platforms. Some called their friends and family to alert them to check the outside situation. As the sun turned black-red, the entire sky gradually turned blood-red. Moments later, thick droplets began to fall from the sky. It was raining, but not normal rain. Many people were frightened by this unprecedented phenomenon. Despite the bizarre rain pouring down on him, he remained unfazed. The more prudent individuals sought shelter from the rain in the mall buildings. News of the strange phenomenon quickly topped the trending lists on various platforms within 2 minutes, sparking widespread discussion about whether something significant was about to happen. In less than 5 minutes, those who had been drenched by the rain began to attack people around them frantically, as if driven mad. It seemed that the only sounds left on the vast land were wails, screams, and cries for help. The transformation from the appearance of the phenomenon to these rain-soaked individuals turning into zombies took merely 20 minutes. The entire city descended into chaos in an instant, resembling a hell on earth. With screams and wails echoing continuously, a pedestrian was struck by a speeding car, and the bewildered driver got out to check on the person's injuries. Taking advantage of the distraction caused by the phenomenon, I cut the power to the elevator, locked the security door, and installed a crash-stop device. I had rented both apartments on the 18th floor, the top level, ensuring no one else was around to worry about being blocked from their home. After securing everything, I picked up a pair of binoculars to observe the situation outside the complex. Continuously, individuals were being tackled to the ground by mutated zombies, only to slowly rise and join the ranks of the undead. The air was thick with the scent of blood, even having experienced this in a past life. The scenes before me left me unsettled for a long time, causing me to vomit my lunch. After cleaning up the vomit and calming myself, I spent the evening by the window, observing the situation inside and outside the complex while noting the habits of the zombies. Through observation and some memories from a previous life, I gained a fair understanding of these zombies. These zombies were exceptionally sensitive to sounds and the scent of blood. Even the slightest noises and smells could attract their attention. Their speed was not slow, and they seemed to operate like perpetual motion machines, never showing signs of fatigue. I witnessed a zombie relentlessly pursue an adult man until he collapsed from exhaustion. With the zombie's pace unaltered, the increase in zombie numbers was much faster than anticipated. By evening, the streets were as silent as still water. This silence became even more terrifying at night, as if it could devour souls, with only the occasional screams and wails confirming that I was still alive. 2 days have passed since the zombie outbreak, during which communication signals were intermittent. Television broadcasts from relevant departments continually reported on the situation outside, urging people not to leave their homes. In group chats and social circles, people were either grateful to be alive or sharing their plight of being trapped without food, willing to pay high prices for deliveries. However, in these times, everyone was wary for their own safety, and no amount of money could persuade anyone to risk their lives. The occupancy rate in the complex was not high, peaking at just a few hundred households. After the apocalypse struck, within just 2 days, only about 50 households remained. No one from our building spoke up in the property group chats, leaving me unsure if I was the only one alive. Some suggested using this time to band together and search for supplies, but most people had some food reserves at home and preferred to wait for rescue. Looking at the piles of supplies in my room, I stayed silent, believing it was best to let them think I was already dead. I cooked a self-heating hot pot, my first meal since the outbreak started. After being hungry for 2 days, anything tasted delicious. Days passed by steadily. 10 days went by peacefully, but during this time, communication signals worsened, and even those who had been calm in the group chats began to panic. Their food reserves were depleted, and there was no sign of impending rescue. The broadcasts offered comforting words but no useful information. Finally, some couldn't bear it any longer and began venturing out in succession to search for supplies. Some formed small groups, armed with kitchen knives, rolling pins, and steel pipes, while others moved alone, cautiously avoiding zombies. One person, overly nervous, stepped on a beer bottle and fell to the ground. The noise attracted about 7 or 8 zombies roaming nearby, who immediately pounced towards them. The fallen person hadn't even gotten up before a zombie knocked him down and bit into his stomach, his screams echoing through the neighborhood. Seeing this, the others lost all courage to venture out and started running back in fear. Those who ran slowly, fearing they would become the next zombie meal, pushed their companions behind them to attract the zombies' attention, buying themselves a chance to escape. From upstairs, I watched the scene through a telescope and couldn't help but sigh. Just a dozen days into this apocalypse, and already there are those who, to save their own lives, disregard the lives of others. I fear the future will hold even worse. That afternoon, I received a call from Sarah. "Lydia, how are you? I've been so worried about you." "I'm fine, still safe for now." My voice was somewhat cold. I found it almost amusing how she said she was worried. It had been over 10 days since the zombie outbreak, and if she had truly been worried, she would have called sooner. Everyone knew she had run out of food in her dorm and was likely calling to see if I had any food. I wondered what kind of bad karma I must have had in a past life to believe such nonsense. I guessed she would next ask about supplies. Sure enough, before I could even finish, Sarah's voice came through the phone. "Lydia, do you have any supplies? I'm trapped at school and haven't eaten in a day." She had said the same thing in another life. I had felt sorry for her then, told her to come stay with me immediately, and taught her how to avoid zombies. But then she betrayed me, stabbing me and pushing me off the rooftop. Who would have thought the apocalypse on the internet was real? I wasn't prepared at all. If it wasn't for the 2 packs of noodles at home, I would have starved by now. I've already finished the noodles and have been surviving on a few sips of water these past days. I feigned weakness, complaining about the hardships I faced these past days. Upon hearing this, Sarah's voice clearly carried a hint of disappointment, and she hung up before I could finish speaking. Some people are like that. They don't bother speaking to you unless they see some benefit, but there's no need to hold grudges with a dead person, right? Today, feeling good, I took some lamb and beef from the fridge and prepared to enjoy a delightful hot pot meal. This was a feast, especially after eating instant noodles for so many days straight. Even my stomach, accustomed to both technology and hard times, couldn't take it anymore. This hot pot wasn't just any meal. I planned to watch some romantic stories about orange cats during it, just as I was about to turn to my computer. A familiar face appeared on the surveillance monitor in the underground garage. My close friend, after I explicitly told her I had no supplies, had come here anyway, accompanied by a man. If I hadn't installed surveillance throughout the building and used 90% of the solar power for these monitors, I wouldn't have expected her to show up now. Why would she come here if she doesn't know I have supplies? And how did she get here? Questions swirled in my mind. In another life, it was under my guidance that she found a secluded path into the neighborhood. I had discovered it by accident, a path not shown on navigation software and typically devoid of zombies. Without my guidance, how did she manage to find her way here this time? And the man following her was someone I had never seen before, about 30 years old. They're definitely not students from our school. How did they meet? I was carefully monitoring their every move, apart from Sarah looking a bit disheveled. There was nothing unusual. However, the strange man was holding a fire axe, which seemed to have some black bloodstains on it. The surveillance wasn't clear enough for me to tell whether it was zombie blood or not. The thought that they might have been fighting zombies all the way here crossed my mind. A chilling thought indeed. Anyone capable of killing zombies is definitely more than I can handle. Even though I had already bought items like a tang sword, compound crossbow, and pepper spray, these were no match for a man, especially for a girl like me with no physical strength. They're more for show than practical use. And then there's Sarah. In my past life, she didn't hesitate to betray me, and now, she managed to get here safely from school. She's no ordinary woman. Having been naive before, I no longer trust human nature in this post-apocalyptic world. If I end up in their hands, my fate would be worse than in my previous life. No matter what, I must find a way to eliminate them. As soon as this thought emerged, my brain started working frantically, constantly analyzing the gap between my enemies and me. An idea sparked by a mental image caught my attention. On the 13th floor of this building, there were 2 zombies. In my past life, when Sarah came looking for me, she encountered these 2 zombies on the 13th floor, had it not been for my use of a cell phone ringtone to distract the zombies, leading them to the other end of the hallway and letting her escape. She would have been killed by the zombies. This time, however, I planned to use these 2 zombies to kill Sarah, which seemed almost ironic. After confirming the presence of the zombies on the 13th floor through the surveillance system, a simple plan formed in my mind. I picked up the compound crossbow, grabbed the Bluetooth speaker and the black bag from under the bed, and rushed downstairs. The elevator was out of order. Sarah and her companion would have to climb to the 13th floor while watching out for possible zombies, so they wouldn't reach it before me. I had time to prepare. I stealthily arrived on the 13th floor, connected the Bluetooth speaker to my phone, and placed it in an inconspicuous spot near the entrance. My phone had a music app already open, just waiting for me to press the play button, which would then blast music from the speaker. I went up to the 14th floor, set up the contents of the bag, and covered them with a simple disguise. Then, I aimed the compound crossbow at the staircase of the 13th floor. As soon as they showed up, I would shoot the crossbow at the man, play the music to attract the zombies, and use them to deal with the intruders. It wasn't a guaranteed win, just a risky gamble. I was betting on my luck, betting that I could hit the man. I was also betting that upon hearing the sound, the zombies would immediately attack them. If successful, good. If not, once they broke into my house, death was the only exit left for me. Time slowly passed, and Sarah and her companion were moving slower than I had anticipated. My hand, gripping the compound crossbow, was already sweaty and sticky, making me uncomfortable, and my body was numb from maintaining the same position for so long. I dared not move, even keeping my breathing at the lowest possible rate. I feared any slight noise might attract the zombies' attention, and they would deal with me first, be ready to shoot the crossbow at any moment. When the man saw Sarah waving, he followed her over. The moment he appeared, I didn't hesitate to pull the crossbow trigger. The dark crossbow bolt emitted a faint chill as it whooshed towards the man. A clang sound chilled my heart immediately. Clearly, luck was not on my side. The bolt missed the man by about half a meter, which was not a small error. Lydia, Sarah was briefly stunned, then a smile appeared on her face. I guess she'd be prepared with supplies, just as I thought. Kill her, and her stuff will be ours. Sarah and the man spotted me. Their voices were low. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the undisguised intent to kill was clear on their faces. Run. That was my only thought. Besides clearly knowing that I was no match for Sarah and the man, another reason was that my Bluetooth speaker hadn't been activated yet. The zombies were attracted by the sound of the crossbow bolt hitting the wall and were heading this way. The zombies moved quickly and were soon right behind Sarah and the man. There are zombies. Sarah's voice. Damn it, she ambushed us. She's going to pay. Let's shake off the zombies first. Once they're gone, we'll have all the time to deal with that wench. They too heard the zombies. In such a situation, they couldn't afford to focus on me. Taking advantage of this, I pressed the play button. The connected Bluetooth speaker started emitting sound. Pleasant Goat and Big Wolf, don't look at me just as a sheep. Originally attracted by the noise, the zombies, upon hearing the music, became even more frenzied. Like wolves that had spotted a lamb, they roared and ran towards Sarah and her companion. Even zombies outside were drawn by the sound and started moving towards the building. Sarah and the man must have cursed me countless times in their minds, but they didn't even have time to speak. 2 zombies blocked their path downstairs, and it was unknown how many more would pour into the building. They could only follow my lead and move upwards, which was exactly what I had hoped to see. Not long after the footsteps started, a scream echoed through the building. I knew that my backup plan had worked. The scream did not stop me from fleeing. I ran back to the 18th floor as fast as I could, locked the stairwell door, placed a door stopper, and double-locked my room door, all in one go. After all that, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and sat down to watch the monitors. The 14th floor monitor showed only a pool of blood and a thick arm, clearly belonging to the man, just as I thought he had been devoured by the zombies. On the 15th floor monitor, the man's figure appeared. He barely looked human anymore. His thigh was gnawed down to the bone, his stomach had a bowl-sized hole, and fluid was continuously leaking out. The remaining arm hung barely attached, as if it might fall off at any moment. It's strange. Zombies. If it were a normal person, injured like that, survival would be impossible. Yet, the zombified man could still walk. As I was reflecting on this, a terrifying thought suddenly crossed my mind. Blinded by victory, I had forgotten. Sarah was missing. I hastily checked all the surveillance feeds. There was no sign of Sarah, nor any trace of her being bitten. I reviewed the previous surveillance footage and saw what happened after I left. The man stepped on a trap in his panic as he was going upstairs. The screams and the smell of blood drove the zombies into a frenzy, and they threw themselves at him with even more vigor. Seeing this, Sarah decided to abandon the man and leave. but he grabbed her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but from their expressions and lip movements, it was clear that the man wanted Sarah to take him with her, but she refused. During their struggle, Sarah suddenly pulled out a dagger and stabbed the man, pushing him towards the approaching zombies while he was still alive. It was just like what she had done to me in the past. The footage from before the surveillance shocked me. And it took me a long time to recover and finally understand why Sarah had been able to kill me without hesitation in our previous life. She was ruthless, completely ruthless from beginning to end. The surveillance continued to play. After killing the man, Sarah looked towards the camera. Her expression was fierce, as if she had anticipated that I would definitely see this scene. Then she took the opportunity while the zombies were devouring the man to escape. Sarah was no longer seen in the footage. Although I had installed surveillance cameras in strategic locations, they couldn't cover every part of the floor. She must have guessed that I could see her through the surveillance and deliberately avoided the cameras. I had a feeling that Sarah was probably not dead, but what would she come up with next to deal with me? It was the 28th day of the apocalypse. Because of Sarah's presence, I hadn't felt like eating properly for the past few days. I was either nibbling on compressed biscuits or eating some chocolate, wasting the ample supplies I had prepared. However, the dangerous situations I had imagined didn't occur, and the days were surprisingly peaceful. Gradually, I let my guard down and returned to my normal life, enjoying my days with plenty to eat and drink. I even got so bored that I pulled out the flowers and plants on the balcony and planted some vegetables instead. I even tried sprouting some beans at one point. I watched countless videos on how to make bean sprouts, but my lack of practical skills led to nothing but wasted soybeans. However, I am good at diverting my attention. I then focused on the rooftop garden, waiting for a day when I felt like it to bring up the soil I had bought earlier and plant something. In stark contrast to me were the other survivors in the neighborhood. As resources became increasingly scarce, some people turned their attention to other survivors. A man named Thomas gathered several followers, feigning helplessness to gain others' trust. When communication was still available, Thomas repeatedly claimed in the homeowners group chat that he had no food at home and hadn't eaten for days, begging others to help him. A couple felt sorry for them and agreed to share some of their supplies, asking them to come up and collect them, but their act of kindness cost them their lives. The moment they opened the door, Thomas's accomplices, who had been hiding outside, rushed in. Not only did they take over their food, but they also killed the couple and threw them off the building. They deceived several households in the neighborhood this way. After the internet was cut off, they began breaking into homes with tools to search for supplies. Many survivors were caught after they broke in, relying on their strength. Young women became their playthings, and anyone who resisted even slightly was killed and thrown from the building. There weren't many zombies wandering around the neighborhood. Most had been drawn to the building where I lived by the music I used to deal with Sarah. Thus, as they searched homes one by one for supplies, my building, which was swarming with zombies, remained relatively untouched. Miraculously, I evaded their search. Time passed quietly again, and when I checked the calendar, the day of the apocalypse had already been 2 months ago. My life hadn't changed much during this period. Bored, I spent my days binge-watching shows and reading books, some of which I had only heard of during my school days but had never read. My skills with the composite crossbow had also greatly improved. Should I encounter the same situation as before, I believe I could confidently hit a man. The zombies downstairs hadn't changed either. I seriously doubted they still followed the natural laws applicable to carbon-based life forms. 2 months without food or drink, yet they still roamed around the neighborhood, stirred into excitement by the slightest movement. However, their presence was a blessing in disguise, as it kept my living place undiscovered. As for Thomas and his group, their days were getting worse. The remaining resources in the neighborhood had been completely scavenged by them after exhausting the supplies. Thomas began to use the lives of women and children to blackmail their relatives into scavenging for more resources outside. Initially, these people, held hostage by Thomas, obediently worked, risking their lives to find supplies. Thomas and his group had plenty to eat and drink and began to vent their frustrations on the women. One woman, unable to bear the humiliation, jumped from a building. A man, seeking revenge for his wife, slit his wrist while scavenging, attracting a horde of zombies. Although Thomas's group narrowly escaped, the large number of zombies now in the neighborhood made it impossible for them to venture out for supplies. With the zombies downstairs shielding me, I led a quiet life until suddenly there was a noise outside my door. Someone seemed to be trying to pry open the security door by the stairs. I quickly checked the surveillance and found that the camera on the 18th floor was missing, which was definitely tampered with. Luckily, I had anticipated such an event and had discreetly installed a pinhole camera. Turning on the camera, the long-missing Sarah and a minor internet celebrity, who had seen me moving supplies, appeared on the screen. "This is the place, but the door is blocked. We'll need to put some effort into pushing it open." Sarah's voice came from the monitor. "I saw her buying a lot of stuff, said it was for a party. Are you sure there's anything left by now?" "What party? This bitch is lying to you." Why did you only prepare so little supplies after believing those online posts? Sarah complained a bit. I alone could make it last half a year by being frugal. Who knew you would join me later? I didn't eat for free, and you didn't do less of that thing either. The price of a pack of instant noodles outside. Think about how much you've eaten from me. Besides, if it wasn't for me saving you, would you still be alive? What do you mean by that? Before they could start prying the door, they began to argue. Sarah seemed angry but then seemed to think of something. Don't worry, this bitch definitely has plenty of good stuff. Once we get this door open, we'll have good days ahead of us. After saying this, she even started getting cozy with the internet celebrity. Damn it, I couldn't help but curse out loud. Watching them on the monitor was so disgusting I almost threw up my meal from the day before yesterday. Fortunately, they hadn't forgotten their main task: to get the door open. After a while, they tried to figure out how to pry open the security door, but the door had already been locked by me with a chain and blocked with a doorstop. Without any tools, they couldn't possibly open it. This allowed me to finally relax. They would have to forcefully break the security door to open it. Forced entry would create a huge noise, and with zombies on both the 13th floor and downstairs, I doubted they would dare to make enough noise to attract the zombies. Just as I expected, after realizing they couldn't open the door with their bare hands, the two started looking for tools somewhere. They first tried to pick the lock, spending a long time at it. The lock broke, but they still couldn't open the security door. Then, they attempted to forcibly break through the door, but the noise made by the axe against the door forced them to stop their actions. As such, the two lingered outside on the staircase for a week without finding a way in. Afraid of zombies, they only dared to wield their knives against the weaker ones, yet they were also terrified that breaking down the door would attract the zombies' attention. Once again, the zombies became my protectors. Over time, the two of them started arguing more frequently. The internet celebrity blamed Sarah for consuming too much of their food supply, while Sarah complained that the internet celebrity was good for nothing but sleeping. Their mental states deteriorated, and eventually, they stopped showing up. The following days were unusually calm. Neither the internet celebrity nor Sarah came by again. However, I was somewhat afraid. This feeling was strange, much like the tense quiet before a storm, so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Then one night, the sound of glass shattering downstairs startled me, followed by something being thrown down. Zombies downstairs were attracted by the noise and rushed over, feasting on whatever lay on the ground. The sound frightened me, and I felt something was amiss. I stayed up all night, watching from the window, too scared to sleep. Nothing else happened until dawn, and only then did I slowly close my eyes. But soon, I was awakened by the sound of an axe breaking through a door. I quickly turned on the surveillance to see two middle-aged men with axes working together to hack at the security door. Behind them, Sarah was dressed flamboyantly, leaning close to a burly man. I recognized the burly man as Thomas, the leader of the gang of robbers. Since a large number of zombies had invaded the complex, they had been trapped inside the building, and by now, they should have starved to death. How could they still be so energetic? Recalling yesterday's noises and the disappearance of the internet celebrity, I hypothesized Sarah and the internet celebrity had known about Thomas and his group in my building. They had been protected by zombies on one of the floors below mine and had evaded Thomas's search. When the internet celebrity's supplies ran out, Sarah brought him to try and steal my supplies, but they dared not make any noise. Running out of food, Sarah killed the internet celebrity and survived on his corpse for a while, facing imminent starvation. Sarah made a desperate move by throwing the remains of the internet celebrity downstairs to distract the zombies and found Thomas, who was also surviving by cannibalism. She brought them here. This was a dire situation for me. They were over a dozen, armed with axes, and could break through the security door in minutes, even though I had upgraded to a blast-resistant door. It would only be a matter of time before they broke through. I had seen these people commit murder, sparing not even infants. Each had several lives on their hands. If they managed to break in, I couldn't even imagine my fate. Even if I surrendered all my food, they wouldn't spare me. Thomas and his group had lost all humanity. My crossbow had significantly improved accuracy, but relying on it to eliminate all of them at once would only provoke a violent retaliation after they broke through the door. Was there really no way out? Standing by the window, I thought that even if I jumped, I shouldn't fall into their hands, but that would only benefit the scum outside. No, I was determined to go down fighting, with a resolve to die. I looked at the zombies in the complex, intending to attract them all here. There were only a few dozen zombies wandering around. Not enough to kill Thomas and his group. What if I attracted all the zombies within a kilometer? I retrieved a drone I had bought while stockpiling supplies. Clenching my teeth, I used a dagger to slice open my arm, allowing the red liquid to cover the entire body of the drone. I hooked up another fully charged phone and looped the song "Don't Think I'm Just a Sheep" at maximum volume. After all that, I quickly bandaged my arm and flew the drone out of the house. I had bought it online for just under 20,000 yuan, with a battery life of 70 minutes, carrying a phone at an altitude of several meters, covering a round trip of 2 kilometers was no problem at all. The air was thick with a ghastly scent of blood mixed with the magical voices of Pleasant Goat and Big Big Wolf. This immediately agitated the wandering zombies, who, as if injected with adrenaline, rushed towards the source of the blood scent, through the drone's transmitted images. I saw that no sooner had it flown out of the neighborhood than hundreds of zombies gathered and followed it. As the drone ventured further, the number of zombies continued to increase. Outside, Sarah and the others had successfully broken through the security door at the stairwell entrance. Thomas, immersed in joy and embracing his lady, directed his lackeys to break down the door, oblivious to the music playing. Inwardly, I prayed that the main door would hold until I managed to draw the zombies in. Only later did I realize I had been overly concerned. Made in China, it allowed no disrespect. The strength of the explosion-proof door exceeded my expectations. Thomas's men took turns attacking. Despite hacking and chopping for 40 minutes, they only left superficial marks on the door. Meanwhile, I had drawn over 1,000 zombies from outside the complex using the drone. These zombies entered the complex en masse, following the drone, and gradually ascended to the 18th floor. By the time Thomas, Sarah, and the others heard the song, the zombies had already targeted them like vengeful spirits, pouncing without giving them any chance to resist. Sarah was the most unfortunate. She didn't even get a chance to mutate before being torn apart and devoured by dozens of zombies, thanks to the explosion-proof door. These zombies didn't discover me. I continued to operate the drone, drawing away most of the zombies. The remaining ones continued to act as security outside the door. I was rescued 430 days after the crisis erupted, and the authorities interrogated me. I reported in detail all the actions I had taken during the apocalypse, providing relevant evidence without any concealment. They carefully examined all the evidence and then looked at me. It seems you need to participate in some labor. We need to rebuild. And we can't do it without talented people like you. What, you don't want to join?